Dear Daddy, how are things on the moon? We've got big news for you today. Daddy, we can see the doll. Love you, Daddy.
From Software. Nowadays they're known for the Souls series, which successfully took them from being that quirky Japanese developer to becoming that genius quirky Japanese developer. Though that may possibly be true, it's important to note that they didn't necessarily make bad games or anything before Demon's Souls started the avalanche. Not only are they the studio behind the hit-and-miss but overall fantastic mech simulator series Armored Core, but they've made a lot of short-lived series or one-off games that always seem to leave people thinking, why didn't anyone do something like this before? Granted, that statement is usually followed by comments on how the end product could have been a lot more polished, or felt distinctly low budget. But 9 times out of 10, you know you're getting an experience you've never even begun to imagine when you pick up a From game. They're a studio who slowly accrued knowledge in a multitude of vastly different genres as well, from the Souls style of action RPG, turn-based strategy style RPGs like Enchanted Arms, first-person dungeon crawlers like Kingsfield, the premier mech simulator series Armored Core, along with a lot of other mech games, and even the sleeper hit hack-and-slash games like Ninja Blade and Otogi. They're no stranger to doing vastly different genres and gameplay styles. I'm not sure how many teams From is made up of, but I'd imagine there's at least a handful. Otherwise, they're easily one of the most eccentric and creative sets of developers to have ever existed. Well, they kind of are anyway. Also, they've been around for a long damn time, having started making games in 1986. Anyway, they're a studio who's known for gathering tons of cult followings for each of their series. One such cult following is behind the Echo Knight series of games. 3 Echo Knight games have been released thus far, with the second one only seeing release in Japan, though it does have a fan translation. Today, we'll be taking a look at Echo Knight Beyond, the final game in the series as of now, and the only one they released for PlayStation 2. It was released in North America on July 27, 2004, to generally lukewarm reception. Most review outlets pointed out the amazing potential of the concept, but cited a somewhat botched execution as reason for their less than enthusiastic scores. So let's dive in already and see whether the game and its reviews hold up. From what I can gather, the Echo Knight series has always been about the same thing: easing the minds of restless spirits through solving puzzles from the first-person perspective. I haven't played the first 2 games in the series, so I can't say for sure what genre they're a part of, but Echo Knight Beyond sits squarely in the horror-adventure camp. Apparently, both Echo Knight and Echo Knight Beyond follow the exploits of protagonist Richard Osmond. I would assume the second game stars Richard as well, though I can't say for sure. Heck, I'm not even sure they all star the same Richard Osmond. I wouldn't think so, since Echo Knight 1 is about saving spirits on a boat, and Beyond takes place on a base on the moon in, year 2040. This particular iteration in the series begins with Richard and his fiancée Claudia on a space shuttle heading toward the moon. They're to be the first couple to ever be married on the surface of the little gray rock. But as the shuttle approaches, something goes wrong and it crashes. Richard wakes up sometime later with Claudia no longer by his side. Steeling himself, he decides to venture into the base and find her. Once inside, though, he realizes that it no longer seems to have many, if any, living occupants, and is in a severe state of disrepair. Ghosts have made the place their home, and some of them don't like guests. So as I stated earlier, Beyond is played in the first person. It's structured very much like a more modern incarnation of the 90s era PC point-and-click adventure games. You find characters, namely lost spirits, blocking your path to progress, and you need to find items, combinations of items, or actions that will release them. Now, it's not like they're always physically blocking doorways or something. On rare occasion they are, for sure. but other times there may be holding a card key you need to explore the base, and more often than not, they block your way through hostility. You see, a strange fog has spread throughout the abandoned base, and this fog seems to leave lost spirits in an uncontrollable fit of rage and hatred. Richard needs to find and activate the ventilation modules throughout the base before the spirits will calm down and speak to him. If you don't do this, the ghosts, who are invisible until you get within a few feet, will start to attack if they see you. Don't mistake this for a stealth game, however. There are no stealth mechanics. Getting past these ghosts is about solving puzzles, sometimes about distracting ghosts with something, and occasionally making a foolish mad dash. As the hostile spirits get close, Richard's heart rate starts to skyrocket. If it gets too high, he'll go into cardiac arrest and it's game over. That's right, the only way to die in this game is through heart attack. To help you on your way, you have an endless inventory to store any items you come across, a map, a flashlight, and Richard is kind enough to take extensive notes on everything he comes across during the journey. Really, the game is pretty simple and easy to get a grasp on. It has a few strange control options, including one that was common for first-person Japanese games back in the day, where you move forward and backward with the left stick, turn left and right with the left stick, strafe with L1 and R1, and look up and down with L2 and R2. Yeah, as I've said before, the Japanese really had a hard time acclimating themselves to modern FPS controls. You do have some more modern control options, though. Regardless, the game keeps itself simple, with a run button that turns into a jump when gravity is low, a flashlight button that toggles low light, bright light, and off, an inventory button, and an action button for interacting with things. There's not much more to explain here, so let's just jump straight into gameplay. Echo Night Beyond plays its horror rather well compared to modern games and movies. It has jump scares for sure, in the form of hostile ghosts appearing out of the fog to lick your face. But beyond that, the scares are much more intelligent and subtle. The game focuses on atmosphere, ambient noise, lack of vision in foggy areas, and unique set-piece occurrences to drive home horror. The game was criticized back in the day thanks to its lack of cheap scares, but I find that this serves the game much better than a bunch of jump scares would. The tension makes the game, as jump scares always get old, regardless of what you're playing or watching. The ones in this game included. After 3 or 4 fog-enraged spirit attacks, you'll likely get used to it. The game seems to know this, however, so it keeps things fresh. Sometimes the ghosts will travel between areas, or be particularly sensitive to noise. Sometimes you need to distract them by moving surveillance cameras from the safety of the monitoring station, or you just have to sprint past them and hope for the best. Even still, they eventually become less frightening, and turn more into puzzles than scares. Back to the monitoring stations for a second. These are little rooms with save points in them, and massive terminals used to survey your surroundings safely. You can usually look through and freely pan the multiple cameras across multiple rooms. Using this to your advantage to scout ahead is always a smart idea, and on top of that, you can usually find some sort of ectoplasmic memories hidden in the periphery of 1 or 2 of the cameras, allowing you to see past events replayed and giving you more backstory or information to help you along the way. One more thing that helps you on your journey is a mysterious android who lives in a small little studio off to the side of the main lobby of the base. He generally stays in his studio, and gives you little bits of information as you progress. He's into painting as well, so whenever you free a wayward soul, he'll paint a picture of them on the walls of his little room. Going back to him every once in a while is a smart idea, if only just to have the company. There's not really too much more to say about the gameplay itself without just straight up spoiling puzzles. The only other consistent mechanics are in the form of the flashlight batteries and syringes. Syringes will calm your heart down if you're about to die from a heart attack. Running, jumping, being attacked by hostile ghosts, or being near non-hostile ghosts and spooky occurrences for the first time will raise your heart rate. None of these can kill you, however, outside of the hostile ghosts, so don't worry about it too much. In fact, I think I only used 1 syringe my whole playthrough, and that was just to see how it worked. Flashlight batteries are much more plentiful than syringes, but equally as unneeded. Well, I mean, you will need the batteries, because your flashlight will undoubtedly run low several times across your journey. If it runs low, it gets dimmer. If it runs out, you have no flashlight. but it's so easy to come across batteries for it that you won't likely have much of an issue, especially if you pay attention and only use it when necessary. So I guess all that's left to talk about are the problems present in the gameplay. First of all, this fits the point-and-click adventure design philosophy to the T. Many of the puzzles are rewarding and fun. Many others are cryptic and complex. Being a fully 3D, freely explorable facility, it's not uncommon to miss picking up an item that's integral to a puzzle. And as the game progresses, these items can be found spread further and further from where they're eventually needed. This really is, in a lot of ways, what people would call a guide game. I wouldn't really say that you should follow a walkthrough word by word, but you should definitely keep one handy. I beat the game in just under 8 hours, but I can see it taking much more time without something to help you along. Without help, some points in the game will leave you just smashing items and objects in your inventory and environment together, hoping something will happen. The map itself can also be a small issue. I couldn't find any way to explore the map beyond the room I'm in, and a few adjacent rooms. Particularly later on, when you're backtracking throughout the whole facility, which sounds a lot worse than it actually is, mind you, you'll end up finding that the map just doesn't do quite enough. If you're looking for the battery room, for example, but you're all the way in the garage, you'll need to move halfway across the facility before the battery room will be visible on your map. Running around in space also really sucks. I totally get what they were going for, but it just doesn't work. When you're out in space, you walk and turn at around half the speed you normally do, and your normal speed and controls are already kind of stiff and slow due to their age, with no sensitivity options in sight either. Couple that with the fact that when you're outside you jump instead of sprint with the run button, and you've got the makings of a giant mess. You cannot control your character at all when you jump, and there are bottomless pits everywhere outside. You'll probably misjudge normal jumps outdoors once or twice, since there are a lot of elevation changes that make jump distances difficult to judge, and some small bit of platforming is required to progress. This wouldn't be much of an issue since the outdoors sections only take up like 1/10 of the base at most. It's literally only 2 zones out of the whole map. But there's one jump in particular, in between moving platforms, over a giant bottomless pit, that is easily the most aggravating part in the game, and one of the most aggravating things I've had to do in a game in recent memory. How aggravating, you ask? Well, it was so frustrating that this review was originally supposed to be done in April. That's right, I spent hours trying to complete this wretched jump, before finally giving up and putting the review on hold until now. I still wasn't even sure I was going to be able to complete it now, and I spent around an hour and a half more time trying the jump before I finally figured out a way to complete it. This jump is a monstrosity. Couple that with the fact that the controls outside are so slow, and the area is littered with objects to walk and jump around, and there's a terribly picky ladder in your way, and you're looking at around 3 to 5 minutes of backtracking in between each attempt. It's absolutely rage-inducing. That's another quick thing. Ladders in this game suck because they're so finicky. There aren't too many of them though. Anyway, I did eventually complete the jump, and I 100%ed the game to boot, including getting footage for each of the multiple endings, and I'd say the rest of the game made that stupid platform jump worth it. Graphically, the game is beautiful for its time. It has some great reflections, great lighting, detailed models, and pretty cool effects. It really makes it feel like you're in an abandoned space station, and it leverages all of its assets in great ways. I would have liked a tiny bit more variation in the design of some areas, but that's really a tiny thing and not really a complaint per se. The sound in the game is equally as good, as long as you're willing to accept the terrible voice acting as intentional camp. See it as if it's trying to be like a B-movie acting experience, and it's fine. The rest of the sound design is spectacular meanwhile. The ambient sounds are extraordinarily unsettling, and feel very futuristic and cold. Meanwhile, the sparse soundtrack is used masterfully, and only really when needed, leading to a fantastic auditory experience while exploring. Honestly, I don't think it could have been much better. The story is a bit less awesome. So as I said, Richard came to the base with his fiancée Claudia to be the first couple married on the moon. They crash, he wakes up alone, and searches for her. The only quote-unquote living thing he can find on the base is the android, who already seems to know both Richard and Claudia somehow. This android tasks you with saving the lost souls who are found throughout the base. Through them, Richard might be able to save Claudia. As you go, these characters you meet are really well individualized, and have their own little vignette stories that play out as you help them. You learn about their past, and through that, you learn about the past of the base, as well as your own past sometimes. Things aren't quite as they seem, we'll just say. Now before I go any further, spoiler warning. If you want to experience the story of this game spoiler-free, and this is a rather good idea for a plot, click on the annotation on the screen, or skip to the time shown to avoid spoilers. You have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The main plot after the initial setup seems really interesting, but quickly devolves into a big mess. All of the side characters are at least mildly entertaining, if not genuinely compelling at times, but the main story isn't really coherent and is full of a lot of plot holes. It's confusing and seems to contradict itself in a multitude of ways. So here's a summary of what I think the plot of the game actually is, step by step. Let me preface this with a few things first though. As far as anyone knows, the original plot is a lie. You don't come to the moon on a shuttle to marry Claudia, at least not in the way that the game portrays it. The game explains in the end that you actually play as an android version of Richard, since the real Richard was the chief of the facility. The real Richard has been at the facility the whole time. During mining, he found a strange red stone. This stone, along with releasing tons of oxygen that the facility desperately needs, also grants wishes. However, in making a wish, you sacrifice the life of someone and create the fog that makes the lost souls violent. Richard made the first wish, which killed his best friend Kenneth, caused the fog, and therefore caused all of the issues plaguing the base. The android who helps you throughout the game reveals near the end that he himself is an android version of Kenneth. So the story starts when the real Richard finds the stone. He makes a wish on it which kills his best friend Kenneth. This releases the fog, and the violent spirits eventually spread and kill everyone else on the facility. You know, one person's dead, their spirit gets angry, kills another person, now that one gets angry, etc. Over time, Claudia, who's not at the facility for some reason, becomes scared by the lack of communication from the base, so she makes her way back to the facility on a shuttle. But the shuttle crashes, killing many people on board. Claudia is lucky enough to survive, as I believe is the crew of the shuttle, but soon even the crew meets their ends. Claudia unfortunately finds the real Richard dead in his room, just like everyone else on the base. She takes the red stone after finding out about its power, and wishes androids of Kenneth and Richard into existence in exchange for her own life. Not sure why they're androids. Maybe it's because the synthetic nature of them prevents the fog from affecting them or something. Regardless, she makes this wish in the hopes that the two of them will save the lost souls here, and that android Richard will eventually make his way to her, saving her soul too. She hopes he'll then destroy the red stone as well. This would imply that the android is being controlled by Richard's soul, and this synthetic body will disappear, setting Richard's soul free when he completes the objectives set out for him by the wish that created him. That would simultaneously explain why near the end, android Kenneth paints himself on the wall and physically disappears after helping android Richard save all the rest of the souls / find his true fate. That's the only logical explanation I can think of, but it still leaves so many questions about things like the timeline, etc. Why is Claudia's body pristine but everyone else is mummified or gone entirely? Why did Claudia originally leave the facility in the first place? How long was Richard dead for when she found him? And how long was it in between her making her wish and android Richard waking up? What's up with the initial plot about Richard and Claudia coming to the facility on a shuttle to be married? Does that purely exist as a poor way to trick the player? Maybe does it exist in android Richard's head, or something else entirely? And why did she seem to already have android Richard with her on the shuttle? Also, why can an android with a soul inside of it have a heart attack in the first place? That's just to name a few issues. Let me start by saying that it'd be amazing to see a full-on remake of this game that addresses all of the problems and gives it a newly terrifying coat of paint. This is a game with super awesome potential. That's why I like it, and I'm still glad I played it despite the frustration it gave me. Too bad that's likely never to happen unless From Software is willing to give up the rights to the series, because I can't see them making a remake, let alone another game in the series. So as for general improvements, the map could allow you to see more connecting areas instead of forcing you to begin traveling in a random direction before you see enough to realize that you're going the wrong way. Flashlight batteries could also be more scarce, and the game could use unsettling occurrences that slowly raise your heart rate in conjunction with ghost attacks much more often. There are a few translation and localization errors that could be fixed, and as much as I love the cheesy voice acting, having a legitimately serious script would be great. They could fix and rework the ludicrously cryptic puzzles, put in some randomly occurring scares, and get rid of that one stupid platforming jump. Finally, add in some options for swifter character control, and rewrite the story so that it makes sense. I know that's a lot of issues in quick succession, and it makes the game sound like a dreadful slog, but I don't think of it that way at all. I think of this as a set of issues that, if fixed, would turn this interesting talking piece of a game into a horror masterpiece. It would take it from being another one of those quirky Japanese From Software games to being another quirky, amazing Japanese horror classic created by the geniuses at From Software. Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever play through this game again. The highlights it has are things I'll always remember, they're so good. The atmosphere is great too, which is why I used to lord this game around as a masterpiece back when I bought it in 2006, despite never beating it until now. And it's not even the cryptic puzzles that are holding me back, since there's a rather amazing guide already out there that makes it super easy to avoid frustration. Why can't I see myself playing all the way through it then? That damned platform jump halfway through the game. I'm not entirely sure that it's required to beat the game, since there are several ghosts you don't need to save to finish, but it's a small enough game that it would feel pointless to play it without trying to complete it all. It'd be like trying to complete Mega Man X without getting all of the armor upgrades, heart pieces, and energy tanks. Unless you're doing a challenge run, that just doesn't sound fun. Anyway, the item you get from said platforming segment is required for saving a ghost who I believe is optional. So if that means anything to you, then keep it in mind. This is a game that's definitely worth experiencing at least once, even if you use a guide and skip saving that one ghost. I'm super glad I bought the game back in the day, and I don't at all regret playing through it. So that's Echo Night Beyond. Whether you've played it before or not, share your thoughts below. It's a game that I really hate to see fall into complete obscurity, so it'd be nice to know that other people know it exists. See you on October 31st for the next spoopy scary Halloween review.